This is an air blast cannon, also known as an ankle blaster. And for the money, I think this is probably the most effective scare in a haunted house. I know I demoed my monster in a box a little bit ago and said that that was a really effective scare too, but this one I think by far is the best because it's small, it's easy to hide, you can even put it outside and no one will even know what it is. And you can trigger this a few different ways. You can have a push button trigger, you can have a step mat, and I'll talk about triggers in another video, but I like motion triggers just because they're much easier to hide, and then you don't have to worry about ensuring that there's a specific pathway that someone has to walk on in order to trigger the prop. And handheld triggers are only effective if you have someone who's going to be a conductor for that. You know, if you have several props that need to go off and everything is hand triggered, that means you are either stuck triggering those yourself, or you're going to have a family member do it, and it's just kind of a pain. For me, I'd much rather be walking through the haunted house with people, attending to props as needed, and socializing with guests as they get to the haunted house. So essentially it's a 5-gallon tank, like I said. There's a valve up here, and this is just a sprinkler valve. There's some PVC, standard PVC pipes that's mounted, and it basically creates a little baffle for the air to go out, and I'll show you a close-up of that in a second. I have all of the wires kind of bundled up for storage right here, and this is the motion sensor. I have it inside of a little quart paint can that I've just painted black, and that's because I usually put it outside, and it's just easy to hide like that. There's an air regulator here, and then down here is a prop controller. So with the tank being about 27 bucks or so, the passive infrared sensor is about 25 bucks, the controller is about 50 bucks, the regulator is about $12 or $13 or up to $15. The sprinkler valve is about the same. So it's roughly about $150 to make this by yourself. But I'm going to give you some close-up shots of this. This is really, really easy to build, and it would be a great first prop. Here's a view of the prop from a different angle. Again, this is the pressure regulator, which you need to have because you need to make sure that you have it set at the correct pressure. I mean, this tank can hold a lot of pressure, but this is how the prop works. You basically have to set your pressure here of how much air you want going out, and you don't want too much and you don't want too little. So right around 50 psi is where I have mine set at. So this is the prop controller down here. I'll get you a close-up of that in a second, and then I'll come around here and show you each component. So this is the prop controller. It's a Peekaboo 103S. I don't know that they make this anymore. They probably have some upgraded model. But all you need is about a $50 controller, and really you only need one output, but I think most controllers come with 2 outputs unless it's like a wiper motor controller. I think that only has 1. But I have 2 on this because I have a fog machine remote hacked into it, so you can hook up a little fogger with this, so the air blast cannon would go off and fog would also come out of the fogger, and you can put the fogger anywhere you want. But it's got 2 relay outputs. Each has a common, normally open, normally closed. If you're not sure what that means, you can do a little research online to familiarize yourself with how these prop controllers work. Essentially, when the prop is triggered, depending on where you have the wires hooked up, if it's a normally open circuit, then the prop is going to close that circuit. If it's normally closed circuit, the prop's going to open that circuit. So essentially it's either the light, if let's say you had a light bulb that was hooked into your controller. When the prop was not activated, let's say your light bulb is on, that would be a normally closed circuit, and then when the prop goes off, the prop is triggered, that circuit would open and your light would go off, and it works in reverse if you use the other connection. And recording these are really, really simple. There's tons of documentation online. It's again, this is probably one of the simplest props you can build. So this is a fog remote control that I have hacked. You see that there's just some lamp wire going in here. This lamp wire, that's all spooled up here, but that actually goes back into the prop controller. And that's on output 2, the air blast cannon's on output 1. This is the wiring setup for the prop. Basically, it's just one cord right here. And I have an extension cord coming in from my garage that this is plugged into. This plug is actually just the power strip. The power strip has two things plugged into it. So there's a 9 DC volt power supply for the prop controller, and then there's just a 120 volt extension cord, like a lamp cord extension cord that's plugged in. And then I have another transformer plugged into the end of that, and that transformer is 24 volts, and that supplies the sprinkler valve that requires 24 volts to open. It probably would open at a lower voltage, but you want it to open very quickly and all the way because you want that blast of air. So I wouldn't try to use it with any other voltage but 24 volts. Whenever I build a prop, I like to always have a power strip on my prop. It just allows you to plug in other things if you want. If this is in the yard, you can plug in ambient lighting. If it's in your haunt, it's just another place that you have to available to you to plug things in. And I like that this is all open because it's very easily accessible. The other thing this allows you to do is if you use it with a fogger and you hack a fog remote, you need a place to plug that fogger in. This has plenty of space. I have 4 outlets available to me to plug that fogger in. And the other thing to consider is if you just wire, like I have this is wired to the output number 1 on the controller, and it's just a standard extension cord that has 3 plugins available to you. If I wanted like a strobe or something to go off at the exact same time that the valve opens, all I need to do is plug it in to this outlet here. I don't have to splice in the wiring or do all of that nonsense. So something to think about if you just wanted to wire in a little mini power strip to each of your output ports available to you from your prop controller, then that gives you other options. Okay, so this is the wiring. So I have a quick connect right here that's coming in from my air compressor, and I'll show you what air compressor I use in a second. That is going to a fitting right here, and I always use this 1/4 inch PVC flexible line. They sell it super cheap at like Home Depot. You can get clear or black. I always get black. I usually have like 50-foot rolls of it available. But that's because you got to get air from your compressor to all of your props, and this is the most efficient and economical way to do it. It's easy to hide, it's easy to fit between cracks through your theater flats or whatever setup you have, and then it's easy to take off. This is just a compression fitting. You pull that sleeve in and it just pops right out. This is the air regulator that goes in. It's got a couple of different reducing fittings to go to I think this is like a 3/4 inch galvanized T that actually connects to the tank. And then this is the sprinkler valve. You can see it's painted black. You can see the original green there. This is just a standard sprinkler valve that you find at Home Depot. Again, they're like $12 or $13. And then this goes into a PVC coupler, and then a short piece of PVC pipe that's probably about, I don't know, maybe 16 inches. And I'll show you what I did at the end. At the end, you want a little bit of a smaller hole because that's going to make more of a blast that would blast someone's legs if they were walking by, and it creates a louder sound. Well, I have this actually wired up and ready to go, so why don't I walk in front of it and I'll set it off. Now usually I just have the motion sensor taped to the nozzle, if you will, just for storage, but you know, if I put this outside, I would take the red tape off, obviously, and set the motion sensor somewhere else. But usually you want this triggered close by because you want people to be really close to this, because that's what makes the effect even better. Although just the noise alone would scare anybody within probably 10 feet of it. So I'm just going to walk by. It's already hot and ready to go. Motion sensor should catch my legs just as I walk by. You'll see how loud it is. Or maybe not. There it goes. And you can see the lights over at the prop controller. You see the red light on. That just means that the scene is playing. I only have a one little short trigger output that occurs, but I recorded a long scene because I wanted to delay. I didn't want it to keep going off and going off, so I want to say that red light goes off for about a minute. And I think the reason it didn't trigger is because I have that motion sensor is probably just angled down. It's probably just angled too far down. So I'll wait for it to reset and try that again. And you can hear the tank kind of filling up back to that 50 psi. Okay, so the prop controller is reset, and now I'm going to try this again by just walking in front of it. And I might even have a little bit of a delay on that, because what's even more effective is if you have a group of people walking by and the person in front triggers it and the person behind them usually gets the scare. So this is what the front of the PVC looks like. So I think that's just some sort of reducer bushing that I have in there. So it looks like a barrel of a gun. And then you can see the motion sensor back in there. And that is essentially the prop. So this is the air compressor that I use. It's a Porter cable, maintenance free, upright compressor. I love this thing, it's great. I've had it for quite a few years now. It's rated to 150 psi. When you're choosing an air compressor, try to get the largest one you can. This number right here stands for standard cubic feet per minute, I believe. So the higher the number, the better. So this one's 3.3 at 90 psi. That's how much air that it can consistently deliver at 90 psi. So basically, for every minute at 90 psi, you can get 3.3 cubic feet. So this is kind of loud, and this will go off quite a bit during Halloween night. So I usually will put this in the backyard. So this is the first time we'll be doing a haunt in the new house. So I had an outdoor closet with a hot water heater in it. We had a tankless water heater put in. So there's actually a lot of room in there. So I'm going to put this in the outdoor closet and just run that 1/4 inch line back into the garage to feed all my props. And another thing you can do is you can buy extra air tanks. I believe they sell like 10-gallon tanks. I have one in a storage building out back, but you can buy them at Harbor Freight. This one's 5 gallons, so I want to say the 10-gallon one is twice as big. I think it's 10 gallons, but that adds so much more volume. And basically all you do is you put a T connection on the tank, just like this one. Okay, so you'd have air line going in from your compressor on this side, and the line that comes out on this side, that would feed all of your props. So essentially you could, almost double how much air volume you have if you had, like a 20-gallon air compressor and you daisy chained like 2 10-gallon tanks together. That would give you a lot more volume, so your air compressor wouldn't have to cycle as much. So totally up to you if you wanted to do that, of course. I really enjoy having the extra tank because the air compressor doesn't go off quite as much. So hopefully that inspires you to try building your own air blast cannon. As far as prop builds go and how complicated they are, this is by far one of the easiest things that you can do and the most effective for the money. Oh, and then another thing, I used to use Teflon tape all the time for like pipe connections. Don't use Teflon tape, it sucks. If you can, use white pipe dope, or sometimes they sell yellow pipe dope. The yellow pipe dope is for gas. It just works so much better. I never have air leaks when I use that stuff, and whenever you use Teflon tape, it just seems like that it's always prone to leaking, and you don't want to be tightening all these plastic fittings too much, because you're dealing with a pretty decent amount of PSI here. It's not water, you're dealing with air, so you need to make sure you have a good seal. And you know, you're talking galvanized pipe to plastic pipe fittings, and the Teflon tape just doesn't seem to do nearly as good of a job as that pipe dope. Alright, so that is the air blast cannon. Hopefully that inspires you to make your own. Again, for the money that it costs to build one of these, it's probably the most effective scare prop you're ever going to build. And it's a lot of fun to build too. Very simple, very effective, and I've had this one for about 10 years now, and it's super reliable.